and welcome to this event. This is a Women Who Futures event. Women Who Futures was created by Abril Chimal and I in 2023. And with this idea of giving women working in futures and foresight visibility, but also reflecting on how we practice futures and foresight and how we engage on issues related to gender or to women's rights when it comes to the field of futures and foresight. So this year we have an amazing lineup of speakers. It's a 24-hour takeover. So if you haven't seen all the program yet, there are still many sessions to happen. And I am very happy now to welcome for this amazing session on participatory foresight the three panelists that are here today, which are working for the United Nations Development Program, Jennifer Hotsko, Moema Freire, and Zainab Kakal. And before handing over to them, just to remember that we have interpretation. So just hit the interpretation button at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and you can find the language that you prefer to listen in. And thank you very much to our speakers who are here on a voluntary basis supporting us so that more people can access this kind of content today. Thank you very much. So without further ado, over to Moema, Zainab, and Jennifer. Welcome. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation. And Abril Chimal will host the conversation. Over to you, Abril.
Thank you so much and welcome everyone. I didn't. And Jennifer, Zainab, and Moema. And why don't we start? And please, let's start with a round of introductions. And what do you do in your day professional? Well, how does a day in your professional life look like? And what kind of foresight related task are part of your routine? So we can start and introduce yourself. Why don't we just start with Jennifer, that I'm seeing you here?
Perfect. Can you hear me well, Abril?
Yes,
Great.
loud and clear.
Perfect. Well, from Panama, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I'm Jennifer Hotsko. I'm head of exploration for UNDP Panama Accelerator Lab. And I will jump right into it. I am part of a cohort, a new initiative by UNDP that was started in 2019. And the initiative was to try to do development differently. So as head of exploration, foresight is actually part of my job description. So it's the first time where I actually had foresight written in as part of the job description, which means that I'm providing technical guidance on foresight, basically in our country office for colleagues and for partners. So I think at the beginning of my role, this meant for myself baptism by fire, trying to really understand what foresight meant for development and the potential impact for development and how it could be best applied. And then I think as I did a deep dive into it, it was about teaching this internally to UNDP colleagues and staff, and then identifying what those opportunities could be externally with partners and collaborators. So on a daily basis, it could be quite expansive. It could be anything from uploading signals to our UNDP Future Trends and Signal system, to teaching colleagues how to upload signals. Most often, I would say, though, it's designing workshops with collaborators, which can be a broad range of stakeholders. Could be anything from a workshop on misinformation with the LGBTQ community to designing a workshop for, like it was a few months ago, Academy of Experts on Climate Change and Security. So yeah, it's a broad range of activities.
Thank you, Jennifer. I think that we are going to continue the conversation on the things that you just mentioned, but let's continue with the introductions. And Moema, you can go.
Thank you very much, April. So nice to see you all. I'm Moema Freire. I'm currently a policy specialist at the regional team of UNDP for Latin America and the Caribbean. I'm working the governance area, and I'm dedicated to the topic of open and inclusive public space and how Futures Foresight came to that topic. So our role is to provide support to our country offices. So we are covering all Latin America and the Caribbean. And we had a meeting recently with them, it was last year, and they have placed anticipatory governance and foresight as a key topic of interest to them. So as Jennifer, I had to learn fast and start applying the topic to support the country offices. And in my role, I have like two ways of doing that support. So one is researching and producing a knowledge product. So in this period, we have already produced two pieces of knowledge on Foresight that I will share a little bit more with you. And also provide support to public institutions and to our country offices on how to apply futures practice on their daily technical cooperation projects. So I also do training and insight support for different country offices. So in this moment, I'm currently in Belize in a mission doing a support to our country office on those topics.
That's great, all over the world. Thank you so much, Moema. Zainab?
Hello, hi Abril, hi everyone else. Very happy to be here. I am speaking today from Suva in Fiji, where I'm based. And in my role is fairly broad. The title of which is Regional Innovation Specialist. So in my role, I cover 16 different small island states in the Pacific. And for us, Foresight became sort of front and center because if we think about climate change and we think about sea level rise, climate change in the Pacific is very, very existential. It's an existential question, and not only like sort of like in the 80 to 100 years to come, but in the next 25 to 50 years to come. So to not talk about foresight it's almost criminal in this context. So for us, it's very front and center. In terms of what my day looks like, as you can tell, a lot of our roles are fairly broad in UNDP. And by the virtue of that, you end up doing a lot of different things. So even one of the things I love about my role is that every day is a new day. There's a lot of ways once you sort of start wearing your foresight hat, the scope for application, you see it everywhere. So we look at foresight not only for like visioning, like how do you actually plan ahead when you know your country is perhaps not going to exist in the next 50 years. So visioning is so core to our work. We look at, of course, foresight for planning. So when you know 50 years, what it looks like, what do the next 5 years, 10 years look like? So work with lots of state governments, national governments in this context on what planning would look like. And then finally on using foresight methodologies to work with communities on what good looks like. So participation there is a key thing that across all of these areas, on most days on a daily basis, I spend some time horizon scanning. And the reason I mentioned that is because I love doing that. And I love that I have, just like Jennifer, some mandate to be able to spend time on that. And also allows me to like talk to everyone else. I mean, a lot of us, I'm assuming as well, work in organizations which are very complex. So it's very hard sometimes to share information or to be connected. So then it becomes de facto people like me play the role of connecting the dots and sharing that knowledge. So just doing the horizon scanning allows me to go to different teams and say, hey, did you know about that? And most people do already because everyone's doing that in their role. But just to articulate that and give them the language, and then they come back to me with some feedback or some other weak signal makes my life more interesting and my work more impactful. So horizon scanning, gathering, deciphering, and disseminating is a huge part of my everyday role. April, back to you.
Thank you so much. And well, what I'm hearing here from the three of you is a part of curiosity to bring into your work and how to enhance that into your workplace, but also the part of interconnectedness, not just about signals, but also in your team, right? And with this, I want to ask any of you who wants to jump in first. Why is foresight important and has been increasingly recognized this important at the UN, or why do you think that it has been increasingly recognized within the UN and also within governments? And right now we have 3 minutes per participants to, and also if you can bring a specific case as an example, that would be amazing. Who wants to go first?
I can go. Okay. I think, like I mentioned, in the Pacific region, foresight is extremely important from a near horizon perspective as well. And when we think about that, the best way to do it is through collective intelligence. There is no way, as you can tell, I am from India. I happen to be based here. There's no way I have the ability to read certain socio-cultural signals. So the best way for me to understand this is to engage as many people as possible. So for about the last year, we've been running scanner squads in the organization. A lot of these, what this essentially means is we have a group of people. So the office in which I'm currently at, which is in Fiji, through that, I basically connect with 10 other offices in the North and the South Pacific. So if you're familiar with like the Pacific is about 40% of the world, right? So the time zones are also, it's not practical. Like when I talk about like 10 countries across North and South, it sounds like, yeah, okay, that's enough, but it's really, it's quite complex. So just running the scanner squad is a huge achievement for the team as a whole, showing up on every Friday and saying, okay, let's talk about two things. One, if you're in country, like, can you tell us something about what's going on? And that's really important because if you think about countries like Micronesia, they don't have any media at all. So you never read a newspaper article about them. So you can only understand things based on people who actually been there, who've spoken to different development partners, who've spoken to donors, and basically come and share that back with the larger team across all the 10 countries. So in-country knowledge and getting that at the right time for the right thing is extremely important for us. And the second is sort of like establishing, so some of the signals are very clear, right? But some of them are also what we think are wild cards. So often when we work with government, some things appear as wild cards, and you're like, oh, this is going to be something that will possibly topple everything as we see it in the next coming, like say in the years to come, in like the next decade. And then you realize that, okay, it's been 2 months in and those things have already happened. And there's a case in which like we worked with the country of Vanuatu where they said, oh, twin cyclones is a wild card. And 2 months later into the process, they had twin cyclones. Security hack at the government level was a wild card. And 2 months later, and this is not even fiction, it all happened during the same time. They had and the basically government system shut down for two weeks. So you can't apply for a passport, you can't get an electricity bill. So it gives you a sense of I think everything is really here. It's not so much about the, imagination or somewhere being very far away. So I think for us, again, having that discussion front and center becomes very important. And ensuring that we have everyone involved in this helps us just sort of define and refine what the intelligence is. Because we are in a landscape where things are shifting very quickly. And unfortunately, we are in institutions that are not moving as rapidly as we would like. So we have that extra responsibility to do better.
That sounds very important, and specifically with what you said, right? Like the fiction, it's not in the long term, but the fiction is right now, or what we can call fiction, but it's happening right now. So I think that's very important. Who wants to go next? I see you, Moema.
I can, yeah, thanks, April. So UNDP, one of the central parts of our mandate is promoting human development and supporting countries to do so. So why it's important to integrate foresight on that? So creating capacities for applying foresight on public policies is key for delivering better results to the society. So it's important to a better planning, to anticipate mitigate risks, but also create new futures and alternatives to the public policies that are being designed. So to do that, giving a very concrete example of some tools and methodologies that we have been developing. For example, in relation to the parliaments, we have mapped 15 experiences all over the world, and then we were able to compare the different trends on how the institutions were applying Foresight concretely to improve legislation, and also how parliaments act, for example, to deliberate on budgets, to oversight on public policies, and to debate new regulatory frameworks for different types of problems on the society, from climate change to digital and to the future of work. So having this knowledge available and these methodologies available for this kind of stakeholder is key, so they can better do the process of decision making. And one challenge that we see here, and it was very clear with this mapping, in this specific case of parliaments, was the challenge of integrating a more participatory approach to this process of mapping the future, the signals, trends, and also on co-creating, as Zainab has mentioned, applying this collective intelligence to create the future scenarios, for example, for applied legislation in the different countries. So UNDP is investing on this kind of methodology to try to stimulate this kind of institutions to be more open to a participatory approach to Foresight application.
Yes, thank you. And this is how you were saying, right? Like just grabbing something that Zainab said about building the collective intelligence, but also you said about bridging this part of the public policies, but also with society, right? How you're bridging those two together, bringing those two together. Thank you so much, Jennifer. And that will get to our next question. But then, Jennifer.
Yeah, sure. So I'm laughing in the chat because I love the name, the signal squads. We call them signal mappers in other parts of the organization, but basically it's right these cohorts of groups that jump on the bandwagon of signal scanning or signal mapping. And we have, I think, probably plenty of stories, Zainab, you starting those groups, and in Panama the same. But I guess back to your question, why is Foresight important? I think in our current context, I mean, specifically for development, right? We are in a total crisis. In fact, I had a conversation with one of our senior leaders today, and he said, in my days, and he's about to retire, just maybe to frame a little bit, their age. But he said, in my days, our uncertainty was manageable to a certain extent. Now, I'm not sure if you've ever heard anyone say that uncertainty is manageable, right? So it falls within the realm of, it's something that I could probably deal with. But he said today he felt like, or he feels like the uncertainty isn't manageable. Like it's so changing and so much in flux. So the next question that I wanted to ask was, so what are we doing differently? Right? So I think that Foresight was proposed, at least in the context of UNDP, as a methodology that is maybe not current practice, or maybe something that's a little bit more difficult to deploy, but maybe it's something that we should be deploying more, because the old playbook is obsolete in today's landscape of unpredictability. So we know that Foresight is crucial because it can equip organizations and governments with the ability to be anticipatory instead of being reactive. But I think, I know we'll get maybe into the challenges a little bit later, but I think it's not mainstream yet, right? It's definitely not mainstream. It's seen as a methodology or a tool that you can play with, but it's a nice to have, but it's not necessarily something that we are continuously investing in, when that's probably something that should be mainstream.
Yes, and well, to this part of the mainstream, and also because often around the world, Foresight projects involves only academics, so pretty much like also the old school, right? Not, if there is any academic here, is not it's not against you, because there are some cool academics, but also a certain groups of expert, like you were saying, Jennifer, your colleague, like he's about to retire, like these people are like, these are the things that are happening around the world, and who is making the decisions, who are being involved in the discussions. So what is the importance? You already mentioned a couple of times, Zainab, Moema, and Jennifer, about collectiveness, about the part of society, including society, the contextual framework. Like, it's not the same for the policymakers and like the people that are living overall, like the day-to-day, these challenges. So what is the importance of having wider participation of different stakeholders and adopting participatory approaches? And do we need to rethink and redefine who are the experts?
Yeah, I think maybe if I'll start on this one, I think because we have a great word that we like to use in the labs, and it's the unusual suspects, right? I think when the nature of the accelerator labs, for example, was how can we work closest to the people who are closest to the problems, and who doesn't currently have a seat at the table? Who are the people that we're not talking to? So sometimes I think we can get caught up in our own, in our own world and our bubble and in our day-to-day tasks. And it's hard to look, outside that frame and look for these unusual actors. But sometimes the unusual actors give us unusual responses. And I think when we're talking about horizon scanning or signal mapping, I think those are sometimes insights that we might not have been aware of, but they give us these lovely aha moments, So I think maybe I have many different examples, but maybe a couple. We were working on a regional human mobility for Latin America, a report, and we were gathering insights from signal mapping. And as part of the process, we involved a variety of stakeholders, people that we had never spoken to before. Again, people that were on the ground, closest to the problem in the field. And one of the insights, we were talking to a worker from the Red Cross. We were trying to understand what was happening in migration, because Panama was seeing some of the highest levels of migration that we've ever seen historically. And one of the insights that this particular worker gave us was that migrants were no longer crossing the border with, scratches like on their skin from trees and brushing up against things in the jungle, but they were arriving to Panama with far bigger injuries like broken bones and things like that. And he was explaining that this meant that the gaps in the jungle, because of the mass amount of people that were migrating, there were issues like exposed roots and slippery, the widening of the routes made things slippery, and I mean all these different factors. And I thought that when we subsequently we spoke to specialists, right, experts, and shared these insights, they didn't find them as interesting, right, as someone that I think had this fresh perspective and that was on the ground. And they suggested that we reference reports. So it's like, how can we be open, to receiving information from a variety of different sources, and then I think be smart about what we're doing with that information that we are receiving, and being a little bit more accepting of these diversity of perspectives. So I think having that open mind, and I think just a wider lens. And back to the great word, right, Abril, that you said, curiosity. I think it's just about being curious too.
Yes, and also that you mentioned another challenge, I think, Jennifer, but that will be the next question. So who wants to go, Moema?
Maybe I can jump in here. I will take some takeaways of our last Human Development Report that was about polarization. And the report brought some important data showing that we are facing like a blockage on human development in different areas of the world due to this polarized context. But the report also posed to us some recommendations on how to overcome that. And one of these recommendations is related to promoting agency and increasing participation in different kinds of processes. So connecting with that, I do believe that strengthening the use of futures with a participatory approach can be an important tool for like shifting the lenses to the polarized contexts and achieving lenses connected with the future. And this can support building bridges and connecting different perspectives and promoting dialogue. And for this dialogue to be meaningful and to be inclusive, it's key to have this approach of participation. And here, the same challenges that we already face in different participatory spaces that are not Foresight spaces, but we already face these kinds of challenges to include, to empower different groups to be represented, to map these different stakeholders that are not visible and are not usually represented on those spaces. I think we have this amplified when we are talking about the use of futures, because as for many people, this is very new and they don't know what the topic is about. So it also can exclude more these groups of persons that usually are not represented and can see these spaces as spaces restricted to a certain kind of knowledge and specifically, as you've mentioned, expert and academic knowledge. So working, advocating for that is very important, but also providing concrete tools and equipping, especially both public institutions and civil society organizations to have this kind of approach to build more inclusive and like democratizing futures for everyone, so we can keep on strengthening the practice and also collaborating directly to the human development in different parts of the world.
Yes, this is very important, Moema, and I can get two things very important for what you said. The first thing is about the taboo around the word futures, right? Like if you say futures, then people think that it's like, oh, you're this magic ball and you are trying to guess something that might not be happening, but then removing those biases, right? Like of what those futures processes means, and also about the new of the methods or the concept, but actually it's very old. Like this part of the it started when to prepare from war, right? Like after the World War II, Herman Kahn, all of these people that were involved in foresight processes for companies and specifically for oil. So it is very interesting how among the years have been shifted, right? Like these concepts. Thank you so much, Zainab.
Actually, I'm glad I went right after Jennifer and Moema. So I think to Moema's point, right? Like that participation is so key to everything that we do in governance. And often it's very clear, right? We're in the business of furthering democracy. We're in the business of strengthening institutions. So it's very clear to what. I think in the Pacific, and this is just my experience, I've worked here for the last 6 years, and one of the things that we are confronted with is when people think about planning, and you think about planning, I mean, at least the Western philosophy, or even how I was brought up, or what I learned in school back in India, is that you think about, okay, next 5 years, next 10 years, and time runs linearly. In the Pacific, time is a circle. And in order to see the future, you have to basically turn your back to the future and see the past and study the past. And that basically becomes this sort of circles of the way people think about the future is very, very different. So you can ask a question Yeah, and people will give you an answer. I mean, at a transactional letter, intellectually, but the likelihood is they're saying something that they've read, or the likelihood is that they're echoing something that they've heard. So one of the ways we sort of overcame that was to actually sit and create spaces where people engage with heart. So we are engaging intellectually, yes, in the question of what the future looks like, and yes, we are deciphering all these signals, and we're doing the rigor, scientific rigor that may be needed. But also, how do we actually bring heart to the center was quite important. And an example here is the work that we did with the Pacific Islands Association of NGOs. So again, like I said, Pacific Islands, there, depending on who you ask, people broadly say it's 16 countries, 21 countries. In this case, the Pacific Island NGOs works with, it's a association of NGOs across the Pacific, right? And these are like very, very small institutions. So think about civil society in a very, very, like a country like Tuvalu has 10,000 people. Civil society there, how do they operate? What are the resources? What's the wherewithal? And people are extremely time poor in this context. And you're sometimes engaging them digitally. So they're actually logging on to a call and thinking about, okay, what will we do together as Piango? So Piango, the organization that we worked with, for them as well, and like for most organizations working in the Pacific, regionalism is very important because the power isn't coming together. It's very, very important that all these countries come across and agree on something collective so that we can advocate for that and we can stand together as a region stronger, not only in numbers, but also in resolve. So for Piango, bringing all these people together is extremely important, and then aligning to the same vision is extremely important. And what is that a vision of? Often our vision is very much described by what we don't want. It's very hard to describe. So we're saying that we don't want violence. But if we say we want peace, what does peace look like? Like, what does that actually look like is the big question, right? So for us, this experience of working with them on what that looks like, having people from across civil society in the Pacific describe, articulate, align on what good looks like and what is a common thing that they'd work on, wasn't, yeah, I mean, it was evidence of the fact that what participation can mean, even participation for the sake of participation can mean. So this is, I'm saying, the lowest denominator of what you can achieve. And of course, you could do grand, big things with people. I mean, the way Moema and Jennifer were talking about, like at the country level. But I think even just, I think alignment to the common cause or the shared vision and articulating at a level where it comes from your heart, like your full being is consumed in it, is something that was very, very much needed for all of us to kind of move forward without digital connectivity, without the ability to meet. Stop, yeah.
Well, this is very powerful, especially because all of you have said the importance of collectiveness, the part of bridging, but also how hard it is. Like we all talk about coming together and accepting different worldviews, right? Different challenges. It depends. Of course, I think that the challenges that the Pacific Islands have are not the same that Latin America has. And just like in Latin America or the Latin American Caribbean region, there are other multiple challenges, and not just language, but also other multiple challenges. So saying this, why is still so hard to convince organizations to conduct participatory futures projects, even when they are open to that? And you are saying it, right? And what kind of challenges do they usually face, and which strategies have you used in your work to amplify?
Maybe I can start on that. I would name like three key main challenges, but I'm sure that there are a lot of other ones. For me, one important challenge is the power dynamics. So who decides on future scenarios? Who will we admit to that space? So once you have like a group or an actor inside that space, so you have it also shifts the power dynamics. So many institutions resist to incorporate some specific groups or actors on those spaces of discussion. So it's also about power. Participation is also about shifting power relations, and that's challenging, and we have to invest in long-term efforts to change that. A second point that I would name is the topic of control. So the more open you are more open to the uncertainty of the results. So many times institutions are open to start a process and to apply Foresight, but they want to have the control on the results. And once it's participatory, then you have to be open to whatever it takes the institution. So it's also a shifting mindset that needs to be worked with these institutions. And last one, I would say capacities. Because many times we have the will on the institutions, they are open to do so, and many times they start working, but without the right capacities or the support to do that. So investing in building these capacities so this process can be the most effective as possible and informed as possible is also a key to achieve good results. And in relation to strategies, I will give a recent example. So we've been demanded in the LAC region to contribute to that, and specifically as a follow-up on the Summit of the Future on the topic of the youth agenda. So we've been in the moment like co-design with different youth institutions toolkit for applying anticipatory governance inside public institutions, but including youth on the participatory processes. So it has been like it's ongoing, and it has been a very interesting process, because through this elaboration process, we are already facing a lot of challenges to build this dialogue and like reassess how to better do this inclusion process through a futures lenses. So I think we have a lot of work ahead, and it's good that we have discussions like the one we are having today, so we can also connect the efforts that different people are doing on this topic.
Definitely more spaces for collaboration, right? And just sharing experiences also, it is important. Very, very good insights on there, especially the power dynamics. I think that is one of the most relevant things that we can notice, definitely. And whose future are you? Well, who is choosing the futures, right? That we want to see on the power dynamics. Thank you so much, Moema.
Yeah, I would say, I'll just piggybacking a little bit off of what Moema was saying. I think also, you know, when people look at the methodology and following that same line of, you know, being open to what these potential outcomes are, I think the biggest challenge that I've seen is people want tangible outcomes, something that's very actionable, right? It's like, okay, tell me what to do now, right? And sometimes, right, sometimes the methodology doesn't necessarily lead you to, okay, now the A, B, C, right? That can be sometimes a little bit conceptual. So, you know, I would say that in my experience from the very beginning, you know, when people find a process or a methodology difficult, they completely disengage, right? They completely disengage. I mean, this can be at an internal level, whether you're teaching signal mapping, you know, to colleagues, or whether, you know, you're with stakeholders and you're, you know, designing scenarios. So I think that for me personally, a challenge, but it's also one that I've accepted is, how can I make this easier for people to understand? How can I ground these processes or tools and methods into a language and into, you know, whether that's, you know, breaking it down into a way that is relatable, that stakeholders or colleagues can understand. So I think that's probably the first thing I would say. The second thing is, I feel like in this process, you have to play the long game, right? This is a marathon. This is not a sprint. So in saying that, it's important to keep people engaged and, you know, have these continuous like touch points always. I'm not even going to give a timeline, because if, let's just say, if I'm not with the organization tomorrow, okay, if I'm leading futures and I leave, what happens to futures, right? So how can we make sure that this is continuously a part of our workflow and it's not just a check mark, right? So we've done this workshop on, gender and futures thinking, let's just say, or signal mapping, and okay, great, we did that. Cool, we participated in that. Now I can write it in my, my annual review, my performance review, right? So I think it's hard, also to play this long game when these structures that are in place aren't really designed to play the long game either. So for example, if we're working with institutions where you have elections, right? You have elections every, 4 to 5 years. So Moema, you talked about working with, a specific institution, but you know that maybe those people will be gone, right? So you're trying to play the long game. You're trying to work on anticipatory governance, but in 3 or 4 years, like all the work that you've done is gone. So how can you build that in and make and sustain that? And then I think the last thing I would say is I think if anyone has ever worked in futures, you know that you have skeptics everywhere, right? It's like the biggest skeptic space you've ever seen. And I would say that there are always people that are going to say yes, right? So I think work with people find the people that will say yes to the methodology, to the process, to going along for the ride. In our case, maybe the entire organization isn't on board. And I saw someone in the chat post asking whether or not, UNDP is funding certain initiatives. But even if the whole organization is on board, I promise you're going to find some people that are, right? So I think you have to work with people that have, where that momentum is, and then ride that wave of momentum.
Yes, and it's also about, well, what you were saying about these egos, right? Like the long game. Sometimes the futures take time to get where we want to, and sometimes it means that probably we're not going to be here in the face of the earth. So how do you deal that, right? With that as well, and that comes to the power dynamics. And back to you, Zainab. I think that you're next.
Thanks, April. I think also building off what Jennifer was saying, I think because people are also incredibly time poor, like I'm incredibly time poor. And this, I'm referring to like the best and the worst of us across institutions, right? And when we are engaging them with a new methodology, to Jennifer's point, like how do I make it like very easy for them to engage? It's a big question that I always ask myself. The other, sometimes I think one of the ways that one could do that is that people should start seeing themselves in the process, right? Or seeing themselves in the future, in the sense, or even if it's someone else's future, version of the future. Do you see yourself in it? Do you see your community in it? Are your interests represented in that version? Going back to Moema's point on power dynamics, and I think our job then becomes articulating that. So I work with a team now within the Pacific office where we work very closely with the communications team. So we do a participation communications loop almost. So say, for instance, we have a scanner squad meeting. People come into the meeting. Every week, the newsletter goes out. We have a signal of the week. We highlight the scanner who sent the signal. Then on a monthly basis, we do like horizon scans. So that comes up on our blogs. It's something that like the regional sessions pick up. So what's really happening in the Pacific, we do, and we deep dive in a topic that is of critical importance to us and our partners. In addition to that, once we do that, we do, say, a topic we don't know anything about. So in this part of the world, particularly looking at critical minerals, there's a lot of deep sea mining, seabed mining, which is, I mean, you can imagine the kind of repercussions that can have, good or bad, globally. So we are now, I mean, in fact, tomorrow we are doing a deep signal studio on that topic, so that all of us can kind of educate ourselves, know a little bit more about, because no matter what we do, it is going to impact us. In fact, our on ocean governance, our horizon scan came out today. So it's just in a way, and because working with the comms team just helps us produce these outputs. So how do I tangibilize the work that we're doing, right? So I produce these outputs. People see themselves in the outputs. Yeah. And I get them showing up at the scanner squad meeting again. Our aim is to basically bring people in the scanner squad who are like the skeptics, really. So we have lots of different kinds of people, which is interesting because most scanner squad meeting, if I hung out with people like me, it's not that interesting, right? I mean, if you're a curious person, you're like, that's not so interesting. I'm not that interesting. So but other people do really, really interesting work. Perhaps, someone who's working, say, in Vanuatu on disaster management. That's very, very interesting. Like what's actually happening there. So we bring people in and then say, can you share your insights? So it gives people an ability to operate with agency. Because many times, I think we believe that the future is shaped by someone else. Someone is sitting, the man in the high castle is going to shape the future. But actually, I don't know whether you can see me, but I'm pointing in this direction somewhere. But I think the idea is that I think the future is shaped by us. It's us. It's all of us in the smallest way, the most meaningful way, in the most meaningless way. It's all of us. So I think creating that agency for change. So when people come and present what they see, their insights, etc., I think it makes a huge kind of difference to the way they see themselves and their ability and their autonomy that they have, going back to the power dynamics. Because what is the energy we are bringing? Yes, there are power dynamics at play in the political economy in which we're operating. But we as UNDP, we as like development partners of choice, what is that like? What are our power dynamics and how do we kind of examine them? I think the last thing to say, to again going back to Jennifer's point, is that like I used to always say that don't be afraid of the skeptics, because like once the skeptic becomes like they get it, they're your biggest champions. But through this experience of doing this work with the scanner squad, etc., I would say fall in love with your skeptics. Like they are going to teach you. Like because sometimes I also find myself saying things that like, because sometimes futures can be very soft and kind of very fairy, and you don't quite know what is being talked about. There are lots of words. So they keep me in check. So I think maybe like one strategy would be just put it up on your desk. Don't I would not recommend falling in love with your skeptics otherwise, but in this case, please fall in love with them.
And
Yeah,
that's
I was just going to say, there's nothing more rewarding, when that skeptic comes to you and says, I think I have a signal, like, right? You're like, oh, yes. I mean, and it's the office joke, right? It's like, okay, and now everyone's speaking the language of signals, whereas before nobody knew what that was. And then, and not only did they not know what it was, but they were skeptical, right, about it. So then it's like, oh, maybe I should be, telling someone that I found a signal, right? Then it's that fear of missing out on, the possibility.
yes, and there once you enter to this future space, there is no way there's no way back. Like, there is no way back.
They're everywhere. The signals, they're everywhere.
Exactly. You have a different lens, like magic glasses, definitely. And with this about the challenges, I think that you will have you have amazing points. I'm going to do a very quick recap before we go to the Q&A. So about control, the part of living the control, power dynamics, investing in capacity development, the tangible outcomes, this part of like, well, maybe there will be tangible outcomes, but probably you won't be here anymore when you see the results, and to deal with that, right? And then the long game, about the marathon, not a sprint. The structures are not built for they are not still built for that, right? And how do we use these capacities, and how do we bring these skeptics to this space, and how do you see themselves in the future? How do you see, do you have a space, do you still have a space in this future, and also opening spaces to create a sense of agency? I think those are very powerful challenges, but also things that gives us a little bit of hope and the next steps, right? So I'm going to read here some of the questions and comments that we have. So whoever wants to jump in, please feel free. We have only 10 minutes, so please keep it as short as possible so we can have some time to read some questions. So the first comment is, I'm trying to incorporate futures into my dissertation proposal right now, and it's been very difficult to sell and to explain it to my advisors and committee. Do you have something on that?
I would say the first thing that comes to mind is I always find examples are really helpful. If you can find examples, I'm not sure, Ramya, what your dissertation is about, or maybe if you want to put in the chat, like, or open your microphone and talk a little bit of, share a little bit of details. But I think that always helps. I think depending on the context of what you're looking at.
Sure, I can share a little bit. I'm a program evaluator, and I've been a program evaluator for like a decade at this point. So I'm working in that space of bridging foresight and evaluation in some ways, but from the evaluation perspective, especially for people who care about culture and values, and how do you actually have this within like an evaluation process that is focused so much on the past and the present, and thinking about like the responsibility, relationality, and the role of evaluators themselves, and how there's, like you had described, there's a lot of power in who gets to decide and be a part of those processes. And evaluation is a space where there's some responsibility in allowing people access to that process. So my proposal that I'm trying to do is using like the idea of multiple futures, realities of the past, present, and future, coming from like an Indian epistemology, but also a diasporic upbringing. I have like a blend of like the Western and also like a upbringing that kind of plays homage to understanding time in a different way. So I want to also create those spaces of understanding how people understand time and realities, with how they also are considering the future in their own work within the evaluation context.
Maybe I can mention something very quickly that could maybe support parliaments and their using futures to the evaluation of public policies for their decision making on how to apply budget. So it's a different approach. I know that you were on academic study, but maybe there some insights I had when I was like knowing these experiences is the potential of using futures on this context to embed the recommendations for the next stage of the evaluation. So if we're doing evaluation of a public policy, then you look into the past, but then you have to shape recommendations to improve the public policy for the future. So for example, you could sum up signals, you could sum up other methodologies to frame your recommendations and better contribute to the improvement of the process or the public policy that you are evaluating. So it can be maybe a way to do that, but I've shared the link with you. So maybe you reading that, you could also bring other insights to the work you are doing.
Thank you both. And we have one last question. If one of you can answer this, so we can wrap up in time. So are organizations like UNDP and beyond also backing up financially? Have budgets been allocated to execute mapped future possibilities to proactively equip against potential scenarios?
Maybe I can take that one. And perhaps also just throw some light on what Ramya's question as well. I mean, the way I see it, Jennifer and I, both of us we do a lot of design in our normal work. And in the design world, we talk about like 15% solution. And 15% solution is something that you can do without extra money, without anyone else's permission, or you and your own resolve, right? That's what we do in proportional planning, in different parts of the world. So I feel like for the foresight work, I am very concerned about what I am doing 15%. That's the most important thing to me personally. And I think once we start doing that more and more, it automatically happens in institutions. because you start thinking like that, you communicate like that, and it slowly starts to get traction. So it took me 6 years, again, because we're playing the long game, to talk about this piece of work. And now it's reached a piece where, yes, we have funding towards it. And the reason I put in that plugin down there is also because we started Horizon Scanning with the aim of creating a repository. That repository now has become a report, which is basically covering 10 themes across the Pacific. That report is now generating a gathering, which is in May. So everyone's welcome, 13th to 15th May in the Pacifica Futures Forum, as a way to talk about the future differently. So I think it just sort of like, I think my job, the way I see it, and perhaps a lot of our jobs, is to keep the wheels turning and do that momentum building. And focusing a little bit, like the way I see it, like we talk a lot about how to do futures. And I'm very interested in how do we be in futures. Yeah. And if I keep doing that, that will give everyone more and more traction.
That is very powerful way, a powerful way to end the conversation. And just to wrap up, if one of you can give one final recommendation for the audience, what would it be?
I think touching on something that maybe Zainab just said, I have a failure story in futures and I love it and I own it, right? And it's my favorite story to tell and people remember it. And it's sort of been a way for me to embrace the skeptic, but then have that adequate answer, moving forward. So yeah, I think if you have a failure story, I mean, Ramya, I hope you're able to pull through, right, the proposal, but I feel like always having a failure story, it turns into something positive in the end. And I think the other brief thing I would say is also something, I don't remember Moema or Zainab, but when you bring people into these spaces, make them the protagonist. Like let them become the protagonist of the work that they're doing so that they can own it, right? And then you build this network effect of people.
Thank you, Jennifer.
I think I'd say that just go ahead, Moema.
No, go ahead.
Okay, I'll do it just in the interest of time. I think, I'd say that I think we talk about power dynamics a bit, right? And we talk about ideas of futures and who's the expert. And like, am I the Foresight expert in the room? It's a big question to me all the time. So I always, like, in my head, I have a quote actually on my desk which says, like, prepare to be humbled. Because this work does that on a daily basis. It on a daily basis humbles me, and now being humbled on a daily basis has become my high. So I would leave that with everyone. Prepare to be humbled.
Thank you, Zainab.
I would say looking into ourselves also, to reflecting on how can we be more accessible. What I'm saying with that. So we are future practitioners, and we have our own community, but how can we really translate what we are doing in our language to the external audience? So I think that advocating for democratizing futures and bringing it more accessible is very important to make it more participatory. And I think I have myself started with a self-reflection today on how can I do that. And as Zainab and Jennifer has said many times, reaching this skepticism and bringing them together to build new opportunities with us.
Thank you so much, everyone. This has been a very enriching conversation. We are at the top of the hour for this conversation. Now I think that Gabby is already in the room. And thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us today and for this amazing conversation. And our next session will be with Gabriela Salinas, that she is here now. Thank you so much, Zainab, Jennifer, Moema.